So we've focused on the Jataka tales about animals, which I could go on with forever. I really like those tales. And I have a feeling we may circle back. But some of the tales are about Buddha in a human lifetime. So we don't want to skip that since it looks like everybody here seems to have landed in a human body this time around. So maybe it's helpful to make the link that these stories are parrots and blue bears and banyan deer, and we were them and they are us. And Buddha also was waking up in a human body just like we are. And I trust that we have enough imagination that we can take these ancient tales and find how they might help and relate to us. And the grief and sorrow of Haiti and Afghanistan this week. Because some of you know, I spent a lot of time working with current era veterans. And of course, the grief is everywhere. And I'm just so aware that veterans who have returned here, who served in, I remember one of the sweetest, most intimate things that a vet said to me that helped me to understand in a way that was beyond all of my political sympathies, Bodhisattva. She told me about a little white flower that grew in Afghanistan. Somehow that touched my heart beyond anything I could imagine, that somehow she had been walked on that land, knows the smell of the air, got to know people there, was asked to play a role that is unimaginable. And that what she brought home, part of what she brought home in the midst of a lot of grief and sorrow, was the memory of a beautiful little white flower that grows in the mountains of Afghanistan. That just touched my heart. It makes it all accessible to me beyond all the big things that I think we're all well aware of. Human beings on the earth trying to figure this out and do the best we can. And how can we imagine a world? Keep imagining a world of love and kindness. So that's our work, Bodhisattvas. So I'm going to begin with, again, I did this on Thursday, Norman Fisher's The World Could Be Otherwise. Imagining the world, it's not could be otherwise, it already is. It's our job to bring it into manifestation, to bring it to life. And because the Jataka tales are rooted and grounded, or later were spun into or categorized as teachings on the paramitas, I'm going to focus on that a little bit, and then I'm going to tell you a story. Well, actually, I'm going to let Raph tell you a story that I'm going to edit and play around with a little bit. Norman Fisher says, imagination and the Bodhisattva path, the 6 perfections. We all have the same human problems. How to take good practical care of our lives and at the same time expand them. Norman Fisher, proposes, although I do too, and I think you do too, the Bodhisattva Vision. You need to find your own version of it as a way to do this. We all want to extend ourselves, to be of service, to have some bounce in our living, and the Bodhisattva path offers inspiration. It's defined by the 6 practices. They're called perfections. The 6 perfections are impossible. This life is impossible, in case you haven't noticed it. And it's perfect. It's perfectly perfect to wake us up, to help us come up to our own edges and our own likes and our own dislikes and our own prejudices and our own to fall down and get up. It's so perfect you can't even imagine how exactly perfect your own life is at this moment. It means imagining that this is a bodhisattva life that you've been doing forever and will continue to do forever, and you don't even know what that means, but your heart does know. And that's what you keep listening to. We practice the Bodhisattva vows through vow, yes, I will. Intention, yes, I will. Spirit, commitment, and action. Through love. That's how we practice. The 6 perfections are expansive, endlessly imaginative practices, and at the same time, they are completely down to earth. That's what's so great about this life, is it asks us to go beyond and beyond and to imagine love and kindness beyond anything we could even begin to make up, and keep your feet completely on the ground. Meet what's in front of you. Meet your own mind. And to stop thinking that what's out there isn't us. The Bodhisattva vows, the paramitas, are ways to develop character, ways we can improve as human beings functioning in the world as it is, and taken as a whole, they define a spirit and a way of life. They define the path of the Bodhisattva. It's a lifetime's project. You will never be complete. The more we practice them in this crazy world, the more we will see how our ordinary human life, with all of its pressures and difficulties, can also be a passionate spiritual journey of understanding that love and kindness is possible, to keep going beyond the self through the perfection of generosity and opening our hearts to ourselves and to others, and to the unimaginable abundance of life. The perfection of ethical conduct, paying attention to our thoughts, words, and deeds, and continually moving beyond self-centeredness and towards love, and wanting to be of service to the world. The perfection of patience, fully facing difficulties and transforming them into the path. The perfection of joyful effort, finding hopefulness and joy even when we can't imagine that it's here. It is. It's always a surprise. It's a path of faith, the perfection of meditation, slowing down our hearts and minds, a practice that we share with the whole world, whether it looks like somebody's a meditator or not, but here in Sangha, it's like we encourage each other, we help each other. Slow down, stop, align with your breath and your body in this moment. And the perfection of understanding. Here's Norman's words. Recognizing that nothing is as we think it is, that there is no separation, no tragedy, that nothing is fixed or solid, that there is only love and endless hopefulness beyond and within what happens and doesn't happen. It's the source and fruit of imagination. May what's happening in Afghanistan break all of our hearts. May we look deeply, and in Haiti. But let's look and look and look, because we human beings keep doing the same old thing. And we can make different choices. So I'm going to tell you the story called Prince Five Weapons. Now this is a story about a 16-year-old boy, man, Prince. And so the story is about 5 weapons. But I thought, I also want to encourage us is when you were 16, when you were in high school, when you were, if you went to college, but those early years, what were you, what are the weapons or powers that somehow you were developing as a young person? What did you think was going to save you? What did you learn and pick up along the way in your family and your culture? Somehow you thought, oh, if I can master this, then I'll know what I'm doing here and how to be here. I'll just tell a short story that I went into a monastery when I was 26, because at 26, I had looked at all the powers and weapons that my family and my culture told me was the reason I was here and the way I was going to be able to do it, and I found them all empty. But it wasn't a good empty. At 26, I went into a monastery because unbelievable that at that point I actually thought, I think I've tried all of this and I don't think any of this is going to work. I didn't know what was going to work. I wasn't going to give up. So what is it that you thought? Which are actually part of your path and awakening. So use imagination as you listen to this story. Long ago, ages back, the Bodhisattva was born as a prince. When he was 16, his father, the king, said to him, "You are now old enough to choose your own life path. Think about what will help you rule when your time comes." What will help you rule when your time comes? What did your parents tell you? What did you tell yourself? "You are right," said the prince. "It is time." And all through the night, this was a very wise prince, Bodhisattva prince, he sat through the night in silence, looking deep within himself to see what his path might be. And when morning came, he went to his father and announced, "I will go to the city of Takasila, where great weapons masters live, and there learn to master the 5 weapons." I will say, I worked with a lot of vets who this is exactly what their parents and their culture told them. Go learn how to use weapons. And then they found out in the heat of awful situations that maybe that wasn't exactly what they needed or wanted. But in this case, because this is a tale of long ago, the king was happy with the son's decision, and so the next morning the prince set out. Crossing swift-flowing rivers, climbing high mountain paths, and pushing through dark forests, he at last arrived at Takasila. Finding a good teacher, he began to train. It was hard work. And when the sun rose, the prince would head for the practice yard and shoot with bows and arrows. And when his quiver was empty, he'd hurl a heavy spear, and then drawing his sword, he'd run forward to splash, lunge, and parry, and finally he'd raise a great club and smash and pound with that. Sounds exactly like what would make a 16-year-old happy, some of them. And then he'd retrieve his arrows and he'd start over again, and he would do it all day and every day over and over. Because this prince had great passion to want to help the world. And this is the best he knew at this point. And so he grew stronger, and his movements faster, and his aim keener. And soon weeks became months, and months became a year. And one day the weapons master called the prince to him and said, "Young prince, you are now well disciplined and accomplished. I give you a new name. From now on, you shall be Prince 5 Weapons. Use your powers for good, and luck will always go with you." The prince thanked his teacher, shouldered his weapons, and set off for home. Now, at one point in his journey where the road narrowed to enter a dark forest, the prince came upon a barricade of chopped down logs. I'll bet some of you encountered dark forests along the way. Probably still are. In this case, Soldiers were patrolling there back and forth, and when they saw him, they called out, "Stop! Stop, young sir! Stop right where you are! This road is closed, totally shut down, and no one is allowed past this barricade." When people used to say that to me, I'd say what he said, "But why?" "Because," the soldier said, "a monster named Sticky Hair lives down this road. And he is heartless and no one gets beyond him. He rips people apart, drinks their blood, chews them up, and swallows them down. No one comes out of the other side of this forest alive. If you value your life, take some other road." We can guess what Prince Five Weapons said, and maybe what we said, some of the challenges we came up against. The prince said, "This monster sounds dangerous." "Oh, he is very," exclaimed the soldiers. "Well," said the prince, "should I turn and run just because danger threatens? I've made up my mind to be of some good in this world. I'll go down this path and make it safe for others to travel. Let me through." And the soldiers were astonished and at first said no, but the prince was so determined, shaking their heads, they watched in disbelief as he headed down the forest path and was swallowed by the forest. I think my parents watched in disbelief some of the dark paths I went down. They weren't exactly happy about it, but I was pretty determined. The prince continued on alone, and the trees grew taller, and there were arching branches that blocked the sun, and the bushes grew more wild and tangled. The road kept getting darker and darker, and soon he noticed that the forest was unnaturally quiet and still, like it was holding its breath, poised and waiting, and even the birds had ceased to sing. And suddenly, with a great crash, the tops of the tallest trees came splintering to the ground, and peering down at him, 100 feet high, was the monster Sticky Hair. Its head seemed as big as a house, its eyes were like muddied ponds, and its nostrils round as boulders. Tusk-like yellow teeth protruded crookedly from the cavern of its mouth. The fingers on its wagon-sized hands ended in fingernails long as broomsticks. Oh my God, this is a scary monster. And it was covered all over with a thick coat of dark, sticky hair like some immense and horrible spider. Now, if you thought Buddhism was boring, you didn't know about the Jataka tales. Nobody's holding back here with monster sticky hair. But was the prince afraid? No, he was not. He was not afraid, and he said, "One more step, monster Sticky Hair, and I'll send this arrow through your heart. I've come to this forest to make you change your ways or strike you dead." Of course, the monster went, "Ha, ha, ha! Good luck, little prince." And so the prince let his arrow fly. Straight as a falcon it flew, straight at the monster's heart, and it struck. But you know what? It didn't hurt the monster at all. It just dangled there. And he tried again. 50 arrows, thump, 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 and they all struck. And they just hung there and didn't hurt the monster. I keep thinking about going to anti-war protests when I was really young and shooting these arrows that I thought were just somehow I was going to change the world, and it just looked like they just hung there. Maybe we still feel that way. The monster roared with laughter and shook himself like a wet dog. And the monster came and came. And then he threw his spear. And you know what? It went completely into his heart, and it just struck there. It just hung there, stuck to the sticky, sticky hair. And then the prince drew his sword. And we can imagine the sword was accurate. The prince did everything he had been trained to do, and it just got stuck to the sticky hair and didn't hurt the monster at all. And now Sticky Hair was looming right over the prince, about to grab down and bend and grab him limb from limb and gobble him up. But was the little prince afraid? No, he was not. He was not afraid. He drew out his club. Clump! And it just stuck to the sticky hair, and it didn't hurt the monster at all. And the monster just kept coming. But the prince kept looking within himself. He said to himself, when I came into this forest, I didn't trust only my weapons. I trusted in myself. I know how to fight. So now if I must, I will use my fists. This little prince doesn't give up. So he strikes with his left. It gets stuck in the monster. He strikes with his right, and it gets stuck in the monster. This is a story of like the tar baby. Then he thinks, well, my legs are stronger, and he kicks with his left leg, and he kicks with his right leg. He just keeps getting more and more stuck in sticky hair. And then he thinks, I'll butt him with my head. And it too became stuck in the monster's sticky hair. The prince was stuck, head, hands, and feet, and he couldn't move this way or that. He couldn't move in any direction. He had no freedom, and he couldn't move at all. But the monster knew that he was dealing with something here he hadn't met before, because the prince didn't give up and wasn't afraid. And that scared the monster. It made him nervous. He hesitated because he was a bully, and it wasn't working with this prince, and he decided to be cautious, and he even began deep down to be afraid. I don't like this, the monster thought to himself, not at all. Everyone else, as soon as they see me, they turn and run, and then I pluck them from the ground, and I lift them up, and I bite off their heads, or I pull them apart. But he didn't even turn when he saw me, and he definitely didn't run. There's a fearlessness to this prince. Something's not right. And so bending down, he says to the prince, do you have a secret weapon? And the prince says, I do. I thought so. What is it? And the prince said, I carry the sword of truth in my belly. Carry the sword of truth in my belly. We might have a different language. What is it that you carry? How is it that you continue fearlessly in this life, coming back over and over again? The monster decides to free him. I set you free. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah. Carefully, the monster reached down and pulled the prince 5 weapons from his sticky hair and set him free, saying, I set you free once more, like the moon when it is released from behind the clouds. But the prince says, I don't free you, monster sticky hair. You've become a miserable monster because you treated others unkindly. Stop doing that, and it will make you much happier. And one day, you'll be a kind and loving human being, and a new world of possibilities will open to you. Maintain the precepts. Uphold the ways of not killing or harming. Be generous and kind. If you do these things, your life will improve. And if you don't, you will only continue to suffer. And the monster really listened, because the prince's heart was true. I've had enough of darkness, enough of all this blood and killing. I'd like to be happy, and I haven't been. So yes, from now on, I'll do as you say and treat others with kindness. I'll protect travelers, not rip them to pieces and gobble them up. And the prince says, That sounds good, but I'm going to keep coming back and checking up on you just in case you need some further reminding. And so the prince takes his weapons, walks out. The astonished soldiers can't even believe what happened, and the prince says the way is clear and the path is open. All may walk safely through this forest now. The monster sticky hair is no more. Travelers will only find a protector down this forest path. And the monster did become kinder, and he helped. And sunlight streamed into the dark forest, and flowers grew, and in time the forest became bright and beautiful, and the monster became happier and happier. And the prince, who had now become the king, would visit sometimes and kept saying, "Keep going, monster," although he must not have called him monster. With your present good deeds, you are building a raft that will carry you over life's rough seas. So far, so good. Now just keep going straight on ahead. And the monster would nod and agree that yes, that made sense, and said that he would keep his vows and not fall back. And one day, years later, at last very old and tired, nearly bald and blind, the old monster lay down in the woods and is almost in the end passed from this life onto his next existence in accordance with his own thoughts and deeds. And not long after that, King Five Weapons put the kingdom into the hands of his son, and he too died and passed on, moving further along the path of wisdom and compassion and love and kindness that he himself had begun clearing and building so many years ago. I'll bet you have and maybe still are dealing with sticky monsters. I'll bet you're using all of your skills and powers. It's a great quote from Suzuki Roshi about way-seeking mind. Raf calls it, I think, Jataka mind. That it arises when you come to situations where you actually meet the end of what you know. You've tried it all, and little by little, it's like the monster said, so what is it you're trusting in? What is this fearlessness that even when you feel small and puny and like you're doing nothing but messing up, there is something you call on, or you wouldn't still be here and alive. You wouldn't still be showing up for these talks about sticky monster and bodhisattva vows. So I'm going to put you in small groups. You can talk about whatever you want. You might want to think about, what are the powers that you believe in? How are they working for you? And what's the edge of going beyond? What is the world asking of you in ways that you maybe haven't even imagined?